Greetings, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Polecat Cast, where we ferret out the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks of this past week. I am your host. What?
Max,
yeah, what?
I'm the host of the show. I'm supposed to be reading that part. That's my line.
The card says, the one that Warren Beatty gave me says that I'm the host.
Well, I blame Jimmy Kimmel. So, if you don't mind, cede me the floor.
Fine.
All right, let's start over.
Just get it on with fate down the way in the back. Go ahead. Oh. Sorry.
Greetings.
Is that what it's going to sound like?
This is how it's going to go, yes. Greetings and welcome, everybody, to the Polecat Cast, where our stealthy polecats ferret out the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Bam Badger style. Buckle up, buckaroos, try to secure your sides, and mind your spines. Also, maybe don't eat anything beforehand, and make sure the bleach is locked up and out of reach. You know, actually, with all these warnings going on, I don't really think I'm doing a very good job of creating any pre-show hype, am I? Today's Polecat panel consists of our Polecat punster and pussy punisher, Hannah, Max Darrett, a Simpsons-kin, not spokesman for Lemonheads candies, although those are delicious, the big half of Big and Robot, Scott, the self-aware simian, and me, your host, the dog behind the controls. Today, we will be discussing the following topics. Casey Affleck won a well-deserved Oscar for his performance in Manchester by the Sea, but he's been accused of being a creep, though, so off with his head. Dr. Jerome Kagan makes the claim that ADHD, most often diagnosed towards boys, is largely a fraud, perhaps even a social construct. A cell phone hits a man and then brags about it in social media by touching itself. No, wait, I'm sorry. There's a hip-hop artist named Princess Nokia, and she did it. I get it now. It looks like men's testosterone levels have been steadily declining over the past couple of decades. If this is true, it might explain some things, like college campuses. Oklahoma is working on a bill that feminists are calling the most oppressive bill ever to be ever passed in history, like ever. We will delve into why this new bill will make feminists' lives a living nightmare today. And finally, our bonus story for the patron-only after show. YouTube has been outed as the content engine of the dark side of the internet. And the content on this open platform must be controlled. Censored. Blacklisted? No, wait. Perhaps there should be extreme vetting for fake news. Anyway, if you would like to participate in our after show, either as an audience member or as a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And now we will get into the stories, but first, a word from Hannah Wallen on the red pill. Hannah?
This will be very brief. As part of the opening of Cafes, that's Canadian Association for Equality's London branch, a screening of Cassie Jay's documentary, The Red Pill, is planned for March 1st. In response, a group has formed on Facebook vowing to protest the screening. The Facebook group states, "Racist, sexist, anti-gay MRAs, go away!" and urges protesters to bring along your signs, slogans, speeches, etc. So far, out of the 300 invited on the Facebook group, only 20 are slated to be going. In possibly related news, the rotating sign advertising the screening has been sabotaged in such a way that the advertisement for the screening is not being shown.
So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. So the red pill is still running into resistance, guys.
But of course, it's totally feminists that are being silenced, not us.
Their voices are not.
It's
poor,
all that
powerless
toxic masculinity, all that toxic masculinity going around that's forcing them to fucking sabotage signs and try and sabotage events. Yeah, and men are the ones that are the problem. That's obviously.
Yep, totally.
Yep.
Shouting them down.
Yeah.
And of course, there's so much unity among women that they got all of 20 people to show
Hey,
up and protest.
Hannah, that is nearly 24, and that's more than 12.
Yeah, that's true. That is more than one dozen. It's even more than a baker's dozen.
That is even more than that. That is right.
This is true. One other thing.
We're good at math here at the Honey Badgers,
Yes.
you know. You guys should know that about us.
One more thing I want to throw in, a little bit of good news to go with that. Speaking of the red pill, Cassie J was sending out a tweet recently that said if she could get 50 pre-orders or a rental pre-orders for the red pill through, I think it's called DVD.com, which used to be Netflix, but it's still part of Netflix or something. It's complicated, extremely complicated. If she can get 50 pre-orders for a DVD rental of the red pill, then Netflix will put the red pill on the streaming service. So that will make it available to anybody who has Netflix. If you guys can do that, please consider doing a pre-order. I did mine already. So I did my part. It probably will happen. I mean, it's not like this is on a time limit or anything. It's just whenever she gets 50 more, then it goes on Netflix streaming. So just something else to consider. Another way to get it passed around. And shoot her a tweet at I think it's just at Cassie J on Twitter. So look her up. All right, so let's get into the stories. Max, well, let's go right into speaking of Oscar jokes. Let's find out what this joke is.
Can I host now?
Oh,
Can I talk now?
I'll give you the floor. You can talk now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. So I'd ask you to contemplate this question to yourselves for just a few seconds, both my panelists and everybody that's watching the show. What do Mel Gibson, Roman Polanski, Marlon Brando, and Christian Bale, what do they all have in common? If you think it's the fact that they are all talented individuals who have won multiple awards for their craft, you'd be correct. If you think it's the fact that they are all assholes whose behavior has, at points, gone from crass to criminal, you'd be correct. Casey Affleck, brother of Batman, was awarded the title of Best Actor this past Sunday at the 89th Annual Academy Awards. For several weeks, pundits, journalists, and other industry workers recognized Affleck's performance in the film Manchester by the Sea as deserving of the top honor. However, like the four aforementioned assholes, he has allegedly, and Michael Jackson tone of voice, allegedly done some despicable things to past female co-workers. Now, according to a report from the Daily Beast, Affleck had charges brought against him by two former female producers on a 2010 film called I'm Still Here. It was the mockumentary featuring Joaquin Phoenix. He supposedly did such heinous acts like order a crew member to flash his penis at one of the producers, recount his sexual exploits consistently, caress a woman's back while she was sleeping, the woman being one of the two producers, and sent one of them abusive text messages, just to name a few examples. Affleck settled out of court with the two women. This whole situation, though, has fired up debate online over the past few weeks on whether or not the politics of this situation, or any situation like this, should influence the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences' decision to award somebody for their craft. Should one's art stand alone from one's personal behavior? I turn this over to the Honey Badgers.
Oh.
In what other profession do we have that standard? I mean, how long do athletes have to wait in between getting in trouble for crass or criminal behavior and actually being able to get recognized for theirs? There's multiple times where athletes have had honors taken away from them because they have done something that's been disapproved or has been considered illegal or has offended people. I'm kind of curious why artists should be exempt from that standard, and like there's where the line should be as well too. I mean, we're in a situation at least in the US, we're in a situation where right now just offending people is getting people torpedoed, in many professions, and artists are exempt. I hate to say it, but why? And why should artists be exempt instead of standing up for where the line should be, standing up for common sense in where the line should be, and instead of setting themselves apart from everybody else, saying, hey, this is the point at which it becomes ridiculous. Okay, so there are accusations. Has there been a conviction for anything?
No.
Has he been proved to have done these things?
No.
So, from my perspective, artists who want awards to be separate from this stuff, what they're basically doing is saying, well, this standard, it's okay that this standard applies to everybody else. Accuse somebody and their whole career is wrecked, but not us. Not us. We should be above that because we're artists and we're special. And as much as I love art and as much as I love the artists that I know, I think that's grade A fucking bullshit. You're not exempt. You're just like everybody else. You have a talent, a skill. You can be great at what you do, but you're still accountable for your actions, and you still are as accountable for your actions as everybody else. And nobody else should be any more accountable for their actions than you have to be. So we find out where the line is, and it applies to everybody. And that's my perspective on this.
Scott, do you want to go first, or should I go?
Wait, do you think I have strong feelings on this, Max? Is that what you're saying?
No. I have. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd pretty much echo what Hannah just said. There's not a whole lot more that needs to be said about it. There's this idea that people of privilege have a different standard of culpability. When it comes to law, we see this very, very specifically, where if a person is famous or has money, they can get away with doing damn near anything that a normal, everyday person that doesn't have fame or money would not get away with. So, and apparently everybody's okay with that, or people are okay with it enough to the point that nothing ever gets changed about it. I'm a little bit torn on this because there's always the idea of separate the artist from the work of the artist from the artist, and I kind of have trouble doing that. I have trouble knowing that Tom Cruise is a gigantic fucking asshole and wanting to see any of his movies. Like, I haven't seen a movie of his since The Last Samurai, because that was right around the time that he came out on the Today Show and was fucking freaking out and saying that mental illness is a fucking lie and this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, well, you know what? You can go fuck yourself, Mr. Cruise, and your Scientology asshole buddies. So it's like that's kind of the metric I apply to it. It's like, if somebody's fucking up, then they're fucking up. And if it affects their work, if somebody is doing an award and they see this person is not marketable and they want to separate them from that award, then so be it. Fucking quit being a dickhead. Quit being a, whatever. And maybe these things won't happen, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a very controversial stance on this because I actually am trying to build a career where I can work in the entertainment industry, either as a producer or an actual laborer, like a filmer, editor, that sort of thing. And I tend to hold the Oscars in pretty high regard because in comparison to all of the other award shows, I believe that the method on which they try to determine which films have the most merit in whatever area you're talking about, whether it's the performances, the cinematography, the editing, I believe that that particular format is best at recognizing which films do it best. It's not perfect. There are some times where they actually snub out films that actually are deserving of recognition, but I think it's the best that we got. In respect to this situation about whether actors or, whoever in Hollywood is exempt from their crimes, I'll try and draw a comparison to somebody that I brought up at the beginning of the summary, Roman Polanski, right? That guy directed Chinatown. He directed Rosemary's Baby. He directed The Pianist. All of which are recognized as some of the greatest films ever made. But that guy is a fucking child rapist. Mm-hmm. A proven child rapist. And for that reason, I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to say, no, don't go see this guy's movies. Do not give him your money. Do not try to let him, finance his life until he pays his debt to society. But, he ran off like a little bitch to France and you never got punished for it. Whereas with Casey Affleck, you have a much more difficult situation because the allegations were never proven. Like apparently, for example, abusive texts were sent to one of the producers, yet we've never seen that evidence. And they settled out of court, so we don't really know exactly what happened between those two. Those three people, rather.
If they settled out, there's an NDA and it won't come out.
Yeah, exactly. So, in that respect, you can't. It's hard to take a definitive moral stance on this, but I can guarantee you that as a result of this scandal, Casey Affleck is going to have a hard fucking time trying to find any work in the future, despite the fact that he won Best Actor. Now, here's where I guess my controversial stance comes in on this. Because I personally hold the award in such high regard, I believe that based on the performance that I saw Casey Affleck give in Manchester by the Sea, I believe he gave the best performance of this past year. And I believe that if one were to let politics openly influence the way that award is given out, then it will become a slippery slope where it affects the way that the other awards are given out in the future. Because, I agree with all you guys. Hollywood is filled with scumbags. Tom Cruise, like you brought up, Scott. But the thing is, artists can be really messed up people, and in that being messed up, they can produce truly great work.
Well, they often are messed up. Often.
Yeah, and yes, often. And the fact is, humbler, nicer people that are greater, more stand-up kinds of citizens can watch that work, take from that work, and recognize how other people recognized it as a great performance, as a great film, or whatever. And if politics influences that, then people might be missing out on something truly special. Don't financially support these people if they're assholes, but recognize them if they made the best art. That's just my stance. I know it's controversial, and I'd love for people to disagree with me.
I'm going to point out that greatness comes with being messed up in a lot of areas. Art is not exempt from that. 3 words: a beautiful mind. And I mean, that's not the only thing. I mean, I mentioned in our chat Pete Rose being kept out of the Baseball Hall of Fame for how long over, at the time, just being accused of betting on baseball. The evidence did not come out on his activities until this century. So this is not something that happens just to artists. This is not something that, like, the fact that a type of sickness can happen in somebody's mind that causes them to engage in compulsive behavior, that they need to have treatment in order to not do. That doesn't just happen with artists. That happens with all forms of greatness. And was Hulk Hogan actually removed from the Wrestling Hall of Fame?
Oh, yep.
Yep, they whitewashed him.
Over words.
Yeah.
Words. Which, they were offensive words. It was a stupid thing to say. And there are things that people say that are heartless and stupid. One of the things that Mel Gibson got in trouble for was saying something heartless and stupid when he was drunk.
Yeah.
Private. It was a private thing, though.
Well, yeah, and then whereas Mel Gibson, when he said it to a cop who had pulled him over.
I was talking about
that wasn't born out of frustration or anything, but yeah, Hogan's words were spoken in private. But and not that excuses saying something stupid and insensitive, but frankly, what you say in the privacy of your own home isn't public business. But in any case, no, this is a situation where, once again, I don't think artists are exempt. And I think that exempting them is actually detrimental to the greatness of art, because it allows that kind of thing to fester and grow instead of being dealt with. And we have SMT Dane says, what did Mel Gibson do? It's been a long time. He made anti-Semitic comments in a rant at a cop who pulled him over when he was driving drunk. And as far as I'm concerned, that
he
was
did more than that, though.
Remember
the
other
phone
things.
call?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember the phone call.
It was like
the phone call when he was
message to his ex-wife or his girlfriend or
Oh,
something,
okay,
and he
okay.
like, it gets pretty. He had to disappear from Hollywood for a while.
For a while.
Yeah, for years.
And wasn't there indication that was alcohol related as well?
I wouldn't doubt it.
Probably.
In a drunk dial. Yeah, because and that's another thing. You don't drunk dial your ex. That's stupid. But yeah, in any case, yeah. So I mean, this is stuff that it does come back to haunt you, and it's not wrong for stuff like this to come back to haunt you. It's wrong to take one group of people and say, well, this stuff needs to come back to haunt everybody else. But these guys are special because they make things that we like. And so it shouldn't come back to haunt them.
You know what this also is very close to the discussion about historical monuments. We've seen here in Richmond we have this road called Monument Avenue, and there are Civil War generals monuments and all this sort of thing, and and they've had the discussion about monuments in other places within the South, and they're like, oh well, these people were horrible, he may have been president but he owned slaves and this, that, and the other, and we've had this discussion, and it's kind of a tough discussion to have, because in one hand we want to hold people in regard that do great things, but then if we ignore the terrible things that they did, are we kind of rewriting history basically to benefit the winners? It's like, well, yeah, here's the statue of this guy, he killed, he had slaves, he murdered people, he did this, whatever, and the other, but he was a great historical war figure or something, or he went on to become president, or this is a really tough discussion to have, honestly, because it has much broader implications, because especially now, because we live in a society that is so keyed up and so ready to be outraged about the slightest little thing, even though the things that we're talking about now, they're not slight. I don't want to diminish their importance, because that's just
I wonder when we're going to start acknowledging outrage addiction as a form of mental illness.
Can I
I mean, the thing is, that pedestal that we put people on is a bitch when it falls over on you. and it lands on you, and you're like, but I thought you were perfect. Why weren't you perfect? It's almost like the members of our species who rise to show themselves to be the cream of the crop, that do great things, that go above and beyond, that push themselves to the breaking point, that live their passion and obsess over things like art or science or any other area where greatness can be achieved, are still members of the same species that the rest of us are, and have the same flaws and the same potential to fall, and the same potential for mental health conditions, and the same potential to just be shitty assholes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that just, all these important figures through history, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. We can still celebrate them for their great deeds, and we can revere them for the change they may have made. And we can also remember them if they did terrible things. Like, I don't think that there's a statue to Hitler in Germany anywhere, but I don't think we should forget about him. And when it comes to the Southern generals, I think to pretend as though there wasn't a civil war is worse than acknowledging, that these figures existed, and to focus. And they're flawed human beings, absolutely. And maybe the people who you thought were bad also did some good. Now, that doesn't mean that we should say that we should sort of invert what Hitler means to people, because maybe he did help Germany in some ways or whatever. But what I'm saying is that we have to treat them as human beings. We don't need to idolize them, and we also don't need to turn them into demons. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge that they had impact on history, and as insignificant as human history is in the vast context of the entire universe, it's still important to us because we look at the stuff that's been done and we use that as our way to decide what we keep and what we sort of discard when we're moving forward. So you might say, oh, look at all the great stuff that Gandhi did or Martin Luther King, but remember that these are people, not saints, and they had their own problems. Gandhi did weird shit where he slept with, girls and stuff and shared the bed with them. And Martin Luther King was known for, being kind of he went around the block, as it were, and he wasn't very faithful to his woman or his wife or whatever. But so what? That's what I'm saying. Like, so what? What the good stuff that these people did is more important. In the case of Casey Affleck, and first of all, I don't even know that it's a fair comparison to go from like talking about these these people that really shaped history and then like look at actors. But I would say that in the context, bringing it back down the scale to people who just entertain us or they create art or whatever. I'm going to echo what actually I agree with what Max is saying. Although my thing is it should be voluntary. So if someone chooses to like watch Roman Polanski movies and they want to buy his movies or whatever, I think that it's their choice, and that does not necessarily mean that they are supportive of pedophilia. And I'm not saying that's what Max is saying, but I think it's important to distinguish someone's work and their actions and their deeds separate from their either other deeds that they've done that are not good or the person itself. Because if we were to only essentially support the artists that are essentially like that don't do anything that we find objectionable, we wouldn't support anyone because we all have problems. Like Jackson Pollock, I don't like his art, but he's a famous painter who did like the dripping stuff. That his paintings don't look like anything but like somebody just spilled paint everywhere. But he's extremely famous, and he was a gigantic asshole. Pablo Picasso was a giant asshole too, but I wouldn't say you can't support him because he was a dick. And when it comes to Casey Affleck, it's important to point out that these are all alleged things, and that doesn't mean that he's innocent. But the fact is, we don't know. We can't know. Right. It was settled out of court. It was done and dealt with. He could have settled because he felt guilt. He could have settled because if he thought that if it became a media storm, he would never get work again. And despite whether or not he was innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter, because when you get accused of something, especially something like sexual assault or sexism, in an industry like Hollywood or anywhere, because people that are, what was the guy... that was a newscaster who was doing he was reporting on a WNBA
Brian
game.
Williams?
Yes, and he said nappy-headed hose. Now
Oh, no. That was the old guy with the cowboy hat.
The old guy.
Don Imus.
Yeah. We will
Don
now
Imus.
He's done. And the thing is, we don't know that the context was intended to be racist. All we know is he said something he shouldn't have said, and now he's gone. And this stuff happens all the time, and people see it. So they have to approach the way that they deal with anything that might come up, whether it's completely false or not, by erring on the side of caution and trying not to give it as much attention, as trying to give it as little attention as possible. So in the case of Affleck, I don't know. He may have done it. He might be a giant asshole. I have no idea. I would assume that most people in the entertainment industry, and this is a bit of a conundrum. I think Max and I are on the same page with this. I love movies. I hate Hollywood, and that's where I'm at.
That's about where I'm at too.
I love movies. I hate Hollywood, but I will not hate people individually within Hollywood. It's just the culture I don't like. Just because somebody said they did something at some point, or there might be there's reason to suspect this, that, or the other. Like even at the end of this Jezebel article, which is where I got this from, they mention that Mel Gibson was because he showed up, and there were people who said, "Oh, you made a great comeback," because he made this movie. The war movie, Hacksaw Ridge. Yeah. He made the war movie, and it was getting a lot of awards, and everybody was talking about how great it was. And Jezebel pointed out that he was essentially being congratulated on his comeback, as though he should never, ever have gotten to see the light of Hollywood, like ever got to make a movie ever again because of the things that he did in the past. And I think that I'm of the kind of person that I understand shit happens, and I don't know anything about his or anybody's personal problems, struggles, mental illness, whatever. But I think that when people fuck up after they pay their penalty, they should be given an opportunity to essentially make good and return to whatever industry or community they were in, provided they, you know, essentially paid their dues. And I think that he did. But, you know, websites like Jezebel.
But you're talking about Jezebel, though.
Well, I don't think.
Yeah, you're talking about Jezebel. They've got an axe to grind with everybody.
They do, but I don't think they're the exception, though. I think that that's actually.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of progressive websites and a lot of people that would think Mel Gibson should never work again. That would say Casey Affleck should never have gotten that Oscar. It should be taken away from him, and he shouldn't get work anymore. But
is that a matter of the site, them actually just baiting for clicks, or is it something they actually believe in? Because sometimes the line is kind of blurry.
Oh,
the answer to both of those is yes, Scott.
I think it is. I think it is. If they kicked him out, if they kicked Casey Affleck out of Hollywood and took his Oscar from him and gave it to somebody else, I bet Jezebel would write an article saying this is a good thing. I think that,
and then the next day they'd forget about it, though. It'd be done because they got their clicks out.
Because and they got their way. It's hard to say.
I don't think it's that way with Jezebel. I think with Jezebel, they're more of an outrage addiction. Like I will go on record as saying I would call outrage addiction an actual mental health condition. Mm-hmm. It is as bad as the dysfunctional end of adrenaline junkies. You know, where not just people that enjoy doing things that are hard because they're hard to do and you face a challenge and stuff like that. But if you're not, if you're not terrified for a moment, you're not having a good time because you don't get that adrenaline rush. That's like, it's definitely a problem for some people. And I'd say that the writers at Jezebel have personified that on numerous occasions. And, well, hell, I mean, they're part of Gawker Media. Of course there's a clickbait aspect to it.
Well, and that's the culture of that whole group anyway.
Yeah.
Too.
At the other end of it, though, they do have that very clear demonstration of being just absolutely being addicted. Like, there's histrionic, which Kung Fu Joe is mentioning, where they have a habit of being outraged over everything. But, like, I swear these people can't live with themselves if they don't find something to be outraged over.
I think it's Gad Sad called it like a mass or group version of what he calls Munchausen syndrome. It's basically but on a mass scale. And
which is what I've called feminism.
Yeah, well,
Munchausen's by proxy.
Yeah, Munchausen by proxy.
I saw that kind of behavior when I worked at Destructoid. There became this group think dynamic that started to occur, where everybody was doing the same thing. It was just, the same kind of thing, like with Jezebel and Gawker and whatever, all these, they fall into that thing. It's like, and it's definitely like Hannah was saying, I think it is very much akin to the adrenaline response.
Yeah. And it's like, it's not news. It's not news if there's not something to be upset about. Good news no longer counts as news. It's just, okay, well, something good happened. But what can we get ourselves all? What can we get our panties in a bunch over? Right. It's just a terrible thing when your panties are too loose.
So
it's like, how do you live like that too? Is the thing I don't understand. That's the thing that like really gets me. Is like, how do you constantly live in that heightened state of just always needing to be mad about something? I just don't fucking get it.
Some people like dig off of it. It's like the same kind of people who are addicted to things like gossip and drama. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That
takes a lot of energy.
No, it does.
Well, it does. And it may actually cause physical health symptoms too. An informal experiment in my own home where my mom, who is like, she's just not the type to enjoy drama, but she got injured and she got sick and she sat and watched television for months and months for a while, and she got into the daytime television where there was all these Law and Order this and I don't know, LA Law that, and all the dramas and everything, and her recovery from her ailments started to drag out longer than it needed to, longer than it should have. Like, even with her, she has other health conditions, but even with those complications, her physicians could not figure out why she wasn't getting better. And so I didn't realize what was going on until I was home from work one day, and I'm over there, and she goes through all of these drama shows one after another, and I made her change the channel, like really nagged her into it. And we watched the Three Stooges, and we turned off the television and listened to Ray Stevens and Weird Al Yankovic, and I went out and got stuff that is comedic, that is like the type of comedy that's more attuned to my parents, that we have some differences of opinion in what's funny, but stuff that basically, if she didn't laugh out loud, we didn't watch it. And she had a turnaround within a week. It was just like, boom, total difference. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was something that would be repeated over and over again with other people. I found that myself, if I get wrapped up in drama and, for instance, on and off, I've been researching America's prison system. And I have to do it in small doses because I get sick every time I spend too many days in a row reading about the way we treat our convicts here in the United States. It's a sad statement to make about both my Constitution and the way we treat our prisoners. But I have to take breaks to do other things, or I will make myself sick. And it's stuff like what we deal with as MRAs. You have to balance that out with positive things and things that make you smile or things that make you laugh. Go look at icanhascheeseburger.com because you get your dose of cute little animals and funny stuff at the same time in between, or you make yourself sick. And I think this outrage culture that we live in, I think a lot of people are making themselves sick, and they get themselves into that situation and they don't know how to get out. You call me Dr. Hannah. My prescription is to every so often have a Three Stooges marathon day, or pick your favorite funny singer and listen to them, or go through, I don't know, damnyouautocorrect.com's best of, because that'll make you laugh every time. Do something to balance it out, because if you don't, you will make yourself sick. Don't let yourself become an outrage addict. And then, like Jezebel here, these guys, I will bet you they have more lost time in the workplace than your average workplace due to people getting sick from being outraged all the time.
Well, to be fair, they're probably all working from home, as it were. So
probably,
and they probably still miss work. They,
probably.
They probably do. I just can't do it today.
We got to move on because we got lots of stories to get through, and to be honest, this Casey Affleck one is probably the least interesting of all of them. Right. I just wanted to throw it in there because there were people saying that because he was supposedly he was alleged to have done something, that they would treat it as though it was fact. So this is basically about knowing the difference between an allegation and a conviction, and what that means. Because this is something that men are going to be dealing with if they're not already. So, well, men are dealing with it already, but individual men. Anyway, moving on. All right, so I'm going to take the next story. Jerome Kagan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, one of the most renowned psychologists of the 20th century, believes that the modern diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is an invention. The National Institute of Mental Health, ADHD, is marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. Where once mental disorders were unknown amongst children, a Spiegel interview with Jerome Kagan cited that 1 in 8 children are diagnosed as mentally ill in the U.S. Kagan believes this is primarily due to fuzzy diagnostic practices. Quote, every child who's not doing well in school is sent to see a pediatrician, and the pediatrician says, quote, it's ADHD. Here's Ritalin. In fact, 90% of these 5.4 million children don't have an abnormal dopamine metabolism. The problem is, if a drug is available to doctors, they'll make the corresponding diagnosis, end quote, according to Kagan. Continuing, quote, if you do interviews with children and adolescents aged 12 to 19, and then 40% can be categorized as anxious or depressed. But if you take a closer look and ask how many of them are seriously impaired by this, the number shirks to 8%, end quote. Children inaccurately diagnosed as mentally ill because they think there is something fundamentally wrong with them has further reaching consequences than the original problem. Using his younger self as an example, Kagan said he suffered from restlessness and stuttering as a child, but his mother told him there was nothing wrong with him, only his mind was working faster than his tongue and didn't feel further anxiety from the issue. Mislabeling common adolescent problems like anxiety and depression as mental illness can have negative psychological impacts, reaching beyond the original issues or amplifying them. Kagan points out that children being diagnosed with ADHD are mostly those not doing well in school, asking why not tutoring instead of pills? Footnote. This is important. Kagan became highly regarded with his pioneering work at Harvard, observing and documenting how infants and small children grow. He wanted to know how personality emerges and what determines mental illness later in life. His most significant contribution was an examination of innate temperaments, finding that as early as 4 months, 20% of babies already have skittish reactions to novelty. He found that these babies, known as high reactives, would tend to develop into anxious children and adults.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, Max. No, you're good. You're good. Take it.
Okay. So I suppose on the surface, the first paragraph that you read, where the title of it is ADHD, a hoax, and then the man says it's an invention. Obviously, as Hannah just pointed out, my instinct is to get outraged because I actually do have ADHD. But the argument that he's making actually makes sense, and I understand where he got there logically, because there are a lot of children that are put on these types of drugs where a lot of the issues that they have aren't necessarily due to having mental illness. For example, I'm sure that you guys have brought up on multiple shows prior to this the issue of how boys are particularly prone to being medicated because they don't tend to adapt to the classroom environment as well as girls do, and as a result, they're put on this type of medication. So there's that problem. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like he's saying that ADHD doesn't exist. It's just the fact that it's overdiagnosed when it doesn't need to be.
Right.
So,
he says that if you do interviews with children and adolescents aged 12 to 19, 40% can be categorized as anxious or depressed, i.e. they usually get diagnosed with ADHD. But if you take a closer look and ask how many of them are seriously impaired by it, the number shrinks to 8%.
there you go.
So he says it is a thing, but it's overblown, in his opinion, by a large margin.
And it is. This is actually a major problem. You have a situation where there's a whole spectrum of contributing factors here, not the least of which is our society's evolving attitudes towards discipline and keeping order in the home and keeping order in the school. We used to have a totally different way of handling it 100 years ago, a totally different way of handling it 50 years ago. And we've gone through a situation where in school, our teachers are faced with, you have to keep the exact same order in the classroom that was kept in the classroom when the classroom was half the size and discipline was corporal punishment. But now you can't use corporal punishment, and you have twice the number of students. And if you say the wrong thing to the wrong student, or pat the wrong student on the back, or stand too close to the wrong student, or the student their feelings are hurt because you gave them a C and they think they deserved an A, the parents can give you a round of hell, and you're not necessarily going to get backed by your school or your union or anything. And so you've got all these teachers that are like, well, now what are we going to do? And hey, there's this diagnosis. The students misbehave. We tell the parents that they have to take the student and get them diagnosed with a disorder that elicits the use of this drug to treat the disorder and so on. So that's one of the problems, one of the many problems. Another thing is that this drug gets marketed on, was marketed on television. Like there's ads for treating your kid for having ADD if the kid makes mistakes and acts like a child. How dare your children act like children? That's terrible. Give them this drug. Give them this spectrum of drugs. And then we have pharmaceutical companies marketing disorders to doctors to get the doctors to sell the drugs to the patient. And they don't give the doctors all the information. And some doctors are more scrupulous and, some doctors are less. I mean, they're just as human as everybody else. And then some doctors are more wise about their analysis of what the drug companies are telling them and what their patients are displaying. And some doctors are less wise. And that's a problem as well. So you have this situation where there's all of these things going. And then we also have dietary changes. We have changes in the way our society is. Things that were acceptable behavior 50 years ago are now considered dysfunctional behavior, like, playing outside in the backyard or the front yard, having a fight with fake guns, like your finger or a stick in the shape of a gun and pointing it at another kid is now considered dysfunctional behavior where it was fairly normal. Climbing trees can get child protective services called on your parents. So, of course, we have a situation where this disorder that is not a fake disorder, it does exist. There are situations where the normal functions of your brain can be dysfunctional in the fact that one thing happens too much. Kind of like how Reddit says when you comment too rapidly in the wrong subreddit, hey, you're doing that too much. Try again in 9 minutes. That can happen, but not as much as we're saying that it does, because we have this situation where everything has changed very rapidly over the last 50 years, and our understanding of kids being kids hasn't kept up with that.
It's also important to point out that for those of you who don't already know this, boys are, by and large, overwhelmingly more often diagnosed with ADHD. And that's why I thought that this story was relevant. And yes, Christina Hoff Sommers has talked about this for many years, and this has come up before. I'm just sort of like trying to drive this home with this more recent article. And I'm glad that hopefully what we're hoping to see is that this conversation about this comes to the fore so that we understand that if we're going to go to the trouble to essentially medicate boys, we got to make sure that we're doing it in an ethical way and we're doing it to the ones that really need help, and not just like every boy that is distracted, high energy, rambunctious, whatever in the classroom, because that's not going to be good for them.
No, I in all honesty, before you let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with your kid, take your kid to a science museum or an art museum and let them go through the kid area of those museums and see how they interact with it. And if they can pick something and pay attention to it and use all of the aspects of the display the way it's intended to be used without behaving badly, I would get a second opinion before you go accepting that your kid needs to be drugged. Because obviously it may not be a matter of the child's attention span being the problem. It may be a matter of the way that your education system is interacting with the child that is the problem. Yeah. I also want to point out, Christina Hoff Sommers did talk about this, so has Warren Farrell, so has Tom Golden. And like the men's rights movement, this has been under discussion in the men's rights movement for years. And it is more of a problem with boys, although I've seen some girls misdiagnosed as well.
For sure. Does anybody have any final thoughts? I know Scott hasn't said anything yet before I go on to the next story.
I was going to say something.
Okay.
I was going to say something real quick. I agree with the guy. I agree with what he's saying. I think mostly it has become, to a certain degree, like you and I are the same age, Brian and Hannah. We're all roughly the same age, and I remember in high school, because I've, ever since I was a kid, I've suffered with severe depression and severe suicidal thoughts, obsessive compulsiveness, and I remember a time in the 90s, probably in the late 80s and early 90s, when I first started going to college, where it became in vogue to say that you were ADHD or you were this or that. It became the thing. It was like this. It was like, oh, I'm cool. This is the reason I'm different, because of this. And I think, when you look at what he's talking about, how people are, misdiagnosed, basically, it's like, when you look at the actual numbers, these things do exist. ADHD does exist, but it's one of these kind of cure-all things. It's like, oh, something wrong with the kid, we got a pill for that. Something wrong with this, you got a pill for that. It's just like they treat mental health like a fucking a smorgasbord bar, like an all-you-can-eat bar. It's like, oh, you hungry for this? Well, we got some of that for you. You want a bun? We got a bun. You want a steak? We got a steak. You want a pizza? We got a pizza. It's like there's that same kind of approach. It's like, what's your problem? We got a pill for it.
Right. Did you notice? Since we are about the same age, did you notice that we went from only getting medicine when our doctor tells us to, and then only taking over-the-counter stuff for everyday things like headaches and my throat and my stomach or whatever. I got some gas, let me go get some Alka-Seltzer. Now there are these I don't know what you call them, but there are these weird commercials that would come on TV that would talk about a product that should be prescription only, and it is technically, but they essentially encourage you to go to your doctor to request it.
Oh yeah.
And this
ask your doctor about the treatment for your disease.
Yeah,
it's like, my disease?
Whatever it is.
I have the disease. I better ask my doctor.
Yeah. And then the side effects include the symptoms of the disease itself. Like, you might die or you might get cancer. But you'll get...
absolutely.
But ignore that because here's
a huge industry.
Sure.
They make a fucking ton of money. So
and
of
now
course they're going to do this kind of stuff.
Now we're in a situation where the way that you get treated when you go to the doctor is much like the woman who swallowed the fly. Right? That's what happened to me when I was growing up. And I had to have my asthma medicine. That was something that I can fully acknowledge. I would have died if I had not had my medicine and I had not done the physical things that I did to build my lungs up. All that stuff was necessary. And what they didn't realize, I don't understand how they didn't get that roid rage can happen with steroids that are not used to build muscles, but they didn't figure that out. So for 20 years, I was on a medication that when they gave it to my brother for a month and he had pneumonia, the month that he took that medication, his entire personality changed. He went from having the patience of Job to punching a hole in the wall over a minor argument. And he's like, I don't understand why I just did that. Right after it happened, he's like, where did that come from? What happened to me? And after he went off the medication, he was fine. Nobody figured out that taking that drug for 20 years would have made me a messed up little puppy. So they gave me Prozac to deal with the symptoms of the roid rage. And it was not just that one drug either. I was on like 6 different things that were all interacting with each other. I had antihistamines, I had decongestants, and I'm sensitive to decongestants, mentally sensitive to decongestants, and then I had the steroids and everything. And they gave me Prozac to deal with those symptoms, and the Prozac caused other symptoms, and they gave me lithium to deal with those symptoms, and the lithium caused other symptoms, and they gave me Prilosec to deal with those symptoms, and the Prilosec caused other symptoms, and it was like the next thing I was going to go to the doctor, and they were going to tell me to swallow a horse. And eventually, I got tired of taking those Prilosec pills were huge as far as I was concerned. Yeah. I didn't want to take those. So I started looking into probiotics. And I started taking the probiotics, and pretty soon I didn't need the Prilosec anymore. And then eventually when my asthma went into remission, and they took me off all the steroids, and I learned not to take decongestants Which is why sometimes you hear me sounding like I snorted the blob and it's just hovering up there waiting to come back out. That's because I don't take decongestants. All of a sudden the mental medication started making me very sick, and especially the lithium, because lithium is, if you don't need it, it's poisonous. It's a salt. And you get too much salt in your system, bad things happen, like heart palpitations and stuff like that. So they test my level, and of course I had too much. So they stopped that, and they stopped the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and all of a sudden now I haven't had to take any pills for a few years now.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I have now to deal with is leftover symptoms from the steroids, which did a few things to my heart. And it's like, this is what medicine has become. It's like we're constantly in damage control mode.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like
playing whack-a-mole with symptoms. But we're not like focusing on prevention in the areas where we can, which we could do early on.
Yeah, and it was a situation where, like, as a kid, if I had somebody say these drugs are causing and this side effect of roid rage, basically, and we will get you into anger management at the age of 6 or 7 or 8 years old, where you're going to learn to deal with these symptoms by using self-control and using behavioral assistance. Like I use music a lot as a mental health treatment, and it works. It works better than any drug they ever gave me, because I don't have a chemical imbalance now to deal with. But if they'd have done that for me, instead of putting me on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which do a really great job of removing the anxiety associated with compulsive bad thoughts, but not the thoughts themselves. So if you're thinking about killing yourself and then they give you Prozac, you're like, well, now I'm not scared to do it. And if they hadn't given me the lithium, which ended up making me sick because I didn't need it, aside from the fact that the other drugs were damaging my ability to process it, I would have been in a much better condition than I was. And that's something that needs to change with modern medicine. And it doesn't mean that there are no kids who should ever be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or depression or bipolar disorder or any other disorder. If they've got symptoms that are definitely and without a doubt interfering with their ability to function normally in life, then they need help.
Yeah.
But the idea of just throwing drugs at them like that's actually more damaging. And there's so much other stuff that we can do to help with kids. And I'm glad that the discussion is happening, because it's actually a really positive thing that somebody can come out and say that, and everybody doesn't come down on him and go, "You heathen! How dare you say ADD isn't real?" It's great that somebody can come out and say, "Hey, wait, let's look at some other options here, and maybe not every child that acts like a little kid has ADD. Let's look at what else we can do to deal with the changes in the way we raise our kids." That's great. I'm glad to see that discussion happening.
Yeah. Lithium, by the way, also a song by Nirvana.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
'Cause today
I found my friends.
They're in my head.
All right, so
but it's okay, because I'm not going to crack.
God, I'm so lonely. But you know what? That's okay, because so are you.
We got to get on to the next story.
Yeah.
But
Sorry.
you got to understand,
Pardon me.
Kurt Cobain was a liar, though. He said he didn't have a gun. Now that is gallows humor.
All right, Scott.
It's sad because it's true.
Speaking of
funny because it's true, or it's sad.
Speaking of music, Scott, I give it to you. Tell us about the.
Speaking of dumb nicknames, what? Destiny Frascari, better known as her current stage name, Princess Nokia, really? Fucking Princess Nokia. I'm sorry, I just have to dress her down a little bit on how dumb that is a New York City-based rapper, singer, and songwriter with an undeniable feminist leaning. Recently, during a charity performance at Cambridge University, Frascari stormed off stage to assault an audience member and alleged heckler. The audience member in question was claimed to have been mouthing dirty obscenities like "Show me your tits," directed towards Frascari.
Tits or get the fuck out.
Yeah, exactly. She reportedly then left the stage and struck the audience member several times and threw drinks at him before returning to the stage and declaring, "That's what you do when a white boy disrespects you."
Really great impression, Scott.
You like that? Thank you. I'm feeling it. You know, I'm trying to inhabit the character of this dipshit. Shortly after the incident, Frascari cut her set short and left the stage for the night. Later on, in an interview given to the Cambridge student, the victim of Frascari's assault denied any heckling at all and was only shouting, "Let's go, Abigail," after hearing from another audience member that the performer's name was Abigail. Cambridge University has yet to issue any comment on the situation. Holy fucking seriously, Princess Nokia? Can we
It could be worse.
Just for a second?
Her name could be Princess Nokia no Nonoke.
Well, I mean,
you can combine two
brands.
This
is like...
no.
She gonna change it to Princess Thin Skin now?
Seriously, oh my gosh, like. I don't know. I find this really funny. It's kind of like there was this radio show. God, it was like back in the mid '90s. It was in Atlanta, and they would talk about beautiful baby names. And one of the skits was one of the guys to do this, like, you know, the beautiful baby names thing, and they would come up with, they'd say, "Yeah, these are my beautiful babies. This is Arangelo and Lamangelo." Orange Jello and lemon Jello, and this is like one of those stupid fucking, you know, beautiful baby names. Nokia. You know, that sounds beautiful. That's what I'm gonna name my baby, Nokia. This is like,
there was a woman who actually did name her daughter Chlamydia because it sounded pretty.
I know.
So, you know, I mean,
yeah, I think there used to be a site where actually they would show licenses or birth certificates and stuff of like actual like legal documents with people's fucked up names on them, and I've seen the chlamydia thing before, for sure.
Hell, during the Puritan times, there were people that would name their children whole sentences, you know, that were biblically inspired, like "there is a balm in Gilead" or some such thing, and then the person's, you know, handle that they got called by everybody would be shortened to one word from that, and their name would be, you know, Gilead or something like that. Okay. Prudence is a virtue. My name is Prudence, and they just would leave out "is a virtue," you know, and stuff like that. My grandmother delivered a baby that the mother named the baby after the train that was the line for the train that was going by at the time. So the child's name was Erie-Lackawanna, and because it was the Erie-Lackawanna line. So people do strange things with baby names, but to come up with your own like that's hilarious.
Nokia, it's a fucking phone. It's like, come on, man. I gotta imagine, like, well, not just from this story, because this story speaks to how her level of intellect, but I gotta imagine she's pretty fucking stupid. And I know I'm being an asshole.
I think the word I would use to describe it is ratchet, but that's just me. That is some ratchet ass shit. As a guy who lives in Humboldt Park, that's some ratchet ass shit. So
clearly, she's a rapper, a songwriter, and a singer, but clearly she's not a comedian, because if she had been a comedian, she would have handled this in an entirely different manner.
Or much of an intellectual. Oh, did I go there? Yeah.
I got a question, though.
Like, she just would have given the guy a funny nickname and started making fun of him. You know, she would have done the insult comic routine on him if she'd been a comedian. That would have been... That's very easy to just turn around on somebody. You know, find something about them that looks ridiculous if they're picking on you. It's like, oh well, look at this guy and his mullet, you know, or whatever, and go off. But no, you have to go down into this stage, and that is pretty ratchet.
Yeah. So why isn't she like in jail or paying a fine or something?
Yeah,
that's my question. Yeah, because it turned out that, well, there's nobody's certain whether or not he actually said the things that she's saying that he said, or if he said something, like the word that I got was he said something different, like he called her Abigail or something, and she misheard it and took it as an insult and attacked him. But you know what? Even if he did say, "Show us your tits," okay? That what he said might even be like, that could be a dick move, it could be annoying, it could be trolly, but violence is not the appropriate response. That is escalating the situation. You're basically going from, you know, something that might be considered dickish to straight up assault. And those things.
Well,
basically,
to be honest,
no matter, just real quick, no matter what he did, no matter what he said, he did not instigate a violent situation, which is assault and battery in this case, and she did. You know,
and if
so
a dude
it's
did it,
pretty clear cut. Yeah,
if a dude did it, there would have been charges. That's a big problem in our society, that we have a situation where women feel entitled to hit because they're mad. That's half of what causes domestic violence. Not that this was a domestic situation, but that is half of what causes domestic violence. Women feel entitled to get physical when they're mad. They hit, they push, they shove, they get in your face, they stick your finger halfway up your nose. You know, just like it's ridiculous to say that half of society can do that, and the other half has to sit there and be stoic in their response to it, and put up with it and not react. That's not right. And it's not right to allow somebody to get away with it in a case like this where it's a stranger either. You know, I've got a friend who has an assault conviction because he popped somebody in the jaw to stop her from trying to stab him in the throat with a pencil. Her second try. She did it once. She did it a second time. He put his fists up and caught her in the jaw, and he was the one that was guilty of assault. She didn't do nothing. He was the bad guy, because how dare he hit a woman? You know, even though she's trying to stab him in the throat with a sharp object, a good, hard, solid, sharp object. No, she's female. It's okay if she's mad, you know, if she's physical when she's mad. It's not okay if you're physical when you're mad. Well, that needs to stop. Equality, guys.
Yep.
You know, you can't. You have to learn to have that same. And I want it to go both ways. I want the taboo to go both ways.
Yeah.
And I want as soon as you violate that taboo, you're no longer protected by it.
I would also like to throw in there too, just to make sure, you know, I've covered my ass. It's hard to know whether or not she's not essentially dealing with legal ramifications because she's a woman or because she's a celebrity. But
or don't forget, we're glossing over another thing here. It's like, what does she say though? She was like, "That's what you do when a white boy disrespects you."
Yes, you hit them.
It's like,
if you reverse the races on that'd be the end of your fucking career. You'd be done.
Fucking saying, seriously, like like if a fucking white woman said, "That's what you do when a black man disrespects you." Like, oh, come on now, seriously, you reverse the sexes. There's so many problems with the situation. It's just kind of hard to pick one to really focus on. But the main thing is that there is a gross inequality legally between men and women, as Hannah pointed out, as we've pointed out many times in the past on Honey Badgers. And it's just, you know, I don't know. I hope she gets fucking, you know, charged. I hope the kid fucking, you know, takes a stand and is just like, fuck this, man. I ain't going out like that, man. Take her to court. Fucking sue her ass. She assaulted and battered you. You know, you have every right to.
Yeah.
Use the legal system to your advantage. Fuck this dumb fucking retard with her fucking cell phone name. Fucking idiot.
It's stupid.
A fucking moron. God damn, dude. Seriously.
But this happens a lot where I don't know what it is, but in the hip hop world, for some reason, a lot of people name themselves after products, and it makes me wonder sometimes if like they're not, you know, trying to sell them or what. I mean, I know Timberland boots, but there's also a Timberland. Like that seems like such a strange coincidence. Like, I remember, there was a time where if you did that, you would probably have to pay royalties or some shit. Nobody's going to come out and call themselves Coca-Cola, but we have an M&M,
I think part of it, though, is like when you see rappers or hip hop artists that used to do stuff like this. I don't know that it's too prominent anymore, but
MC Donald's.
They attach their identity with something that has societal cachet.
Yeah.
It's like fuck. I'm fucking staggering for an example at the moment, but I'm just gonna if somebody was MC Mercedes or whatever, it's like, and they fucking wore like a Mercedes symbol on a chain or whatever it is, I mean, there's all kinds of examples. I just can't think of one at the moment, but I mean, it's like you said, like the Timbaland thing. He's a producer. I mean, maybe that's actually his name. It's not outside the bound of reason. It sounds like a more reasonable thing than wanting to be named after a shoe, but who maybe likes the fucking shoes, like DJ Nike or something like that. There's plenty of examples.
I know. I just find it strange. I mean, it's, maybe I'm just an old guy. No, it's been going on for a long time.
There used to be more creativity and more like personalization in names now, and somebody pointed out here, why do you guys have to have your names so long with no freaking vowels in between some of the consonants here? So anyway, I don't know, Schneidel Woods or whatever says Eminem is Marshall Mathers. Eminem. That makes at least some sense, and it used to be more fun. Now you kind of got, I don't know, it's gotten to the point where there's no brains in it anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be all about brains.
So
it depends on what kind of artist you're talking about, though, because
there still are some people in hip hop that are still doing the good, intelligent, sort of well thought out stuff, but they don't become popular. Right. They're not the ones that that hoist it up. It's usually the ones that have like the catchy stuff. It's just like pop. It's like pop music, though. It's not much different.
There's a spectrum.
In terms of.
But it used to be all about finding creative ways to talk about the things you saw in your life.
Sure. Well, it was for a time,
and then it just sort of fell apart. Like it came out of pop music and it turned back into pop music.
No, I'm gonna disagree with you on that. I don't think it came out of pop music. Not maybe radio hip hop did, radio rap did, but I mean, like real hip hop. We're talking about like
that real shit.
Oh God,
that real shit, though.
I mean. Dude, I used to be super into fucking hip hop music for fucking ages. I was a buyer for Tower Records, and I fucking loved it. I still do to a certain extent. It's just not the same anymore, though. But
sure,
there were a lot of like artists that didn't come from pop music. They definitely were not pop music. They were.
Well, no, I'm not saying every artist came from pop music, but it did. The start of it did sort of. It still had its roots.
Well, sampling
in pop.
and stuff.
Yeah.
They were sampling pop music, but anyway, that's another discussion.
I was like, even putting spoken lyrics to music that was made popular before it was made common.
I see what you did there. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next story. Okay.
He used to be good, then he's terrible.
My turn. I know. Very, very mainstream. All right. Men low on testosterone. A study published back in 2006 in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that testosterone levels in American men have been declining over the past couple of decades. They based their study on data from the Massachusetts Male Aging Study, that's the MMAS. In 1988, 50-year-old men had higher serum testosterone concentrations than comparable 50-year-old men in 1996, suggesting factors besides age are contributing to the observed decline. Researchers also attempted to account for additional factors such as obesity, smoking, and medications, finding that the subject's total testosterone decreased on an average of 1.2% every year. The observed declines could have been altered by subtle changes in the way that the samples were obtained or processed and or unmeasured health or environmental factors, so the study should be taken with a grain of salt. Hopefully, researchers will continue this work and more studies will attempt to replicate those results for the modern age. Low serum testosterone has been linked to obesity, diabetes, low bone and muscle mass, low libido, and other medical conditions. Okay.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to stop.
It's okay, Scott.
I was going to say, just real quick, we talked about this before, like how there's, when you talk about medications being flushed and it getting into the water system, how like birth control gets flushed a lot, and that shows up in parts of memory in the water system. And then we have things like BPA, the stuff that they line, or is it BPH? Christ,
I think it's BPH is what you're talking about.
I think it's BPH.
Yeah, it's BPH.
Yeah, and they line soda cans and food cans with it, and apparently that has an effect on estrogen and testosterone levels. So, I think it's probably largely due to those kind of things, is that everything is dipped in fucking chemicals. It's like, and that's at some point that stuff's going to get back into your body. You're going to absorb it. And it's going to have a reaction. Your body's going to have a reaction to it. So,
yeah.
There's another aspect to this. The discussion about low testosterone being linked to that specific set of health problems. All of the ones on the list after obesity are linked to obesity. In the 80s, for some stupid reason, the prevailing wisdom among dietitians and medical personnel was that eating fat made you fat, and it was better to eat more carbs. And we went through an entire generation of people eating carb-heavy meals that ended up getting fat and developing diabetes and all of these other health problems, heart conditions, and all this other stuff. And I suspect that is a major contributing factor, simply because I've learned that is a similar effect, has a similar effect on women. And this is something that has hit me personally, and I haven't even gotten like really overweight. I just gained a few extra pounds and developed an estrogen imbalance, that the type that women usually go to the doctor and they get birth control pills for physical health symptoms that are painful. And I went to the doctor and I talked to him and I said, is there anything else I can do? I don't want to start taking drugs again. He goes, yeah, lose weight. If you lose weight, this problem may go away, because for a woman, getting fat messes up your estrogen, and you suddenly start having worse symptoms of PMS and all kinds of other stuff that goes along with a change in your estrogen. And start eating these things and stop eating these things. And it turns out that 80s diet was exactly the wrong thing. And there's no substitute for moderation when it comes to good fat versus bad fat and all of that. But the reality is, it may be that those dietary changes that we made back in the 80s that were wrong we're going to be riding out a whole generation or two of serious and inconvenient and very annoying health problems because of this. Yeah. And the solution may be eating healthier, including having a lower carb diet, or at least a healthier carb diet, and exercise. The one thing that everybody tries to avoid. And you know what? We're going to have to put up with some body shaming. If your butt gets too big and your ass looks fat in those pants.
Hey, the butt can never get too big, Hannah. You just stop that right now.
Oh, yes, it can.
Scott,
if it takes up 2 seats on the bus, it's too big.
Yeah, there's a cutoff for that.
There's a cutoff for that. If your waistline gets too
the
big.
Whole thing,
As long as it stays circular and yeah.
And bouncy. But yeah, if your waistline gets too big, if your belly gets too big, if people are asking you if you're pregnant and you haven't been pregnant in 20 years, that might be the cause of your other health problems. And it's perfectly okay to say, no, you need to lose that weight. Because it's healthy to say, no, you need to lose that weight. So it might be that the whole fat shaming thing is causing people more health problems than anything else.
You know what I'm waiting for? Seriously, I've been waiting for this, and I haven't seen an instance of it. But I'm legitimately I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it has, and I just don't know. But I would not be surprised if sometime in the next 5 years we see somebody suing their doctor because their doctor told them they need to lose weight, and they're gonna frame it under fat shaming. I'm just fucking waiting for it, man. I'm absolutely, seriously. I've been waiting for this for years now, and I know it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, you're probably right. Oh, the doctor gave me depression because he said I was fat. You know, and you know, on the other end of it, you go to the doctor and you're fat, and everything gets attributed to that. I broke my leg. You're too fat. Well, can you treat my leg? No, you got to lose the weight first. You know, there's a line, but yeah, you know, you got to be able to tell people to do what it takes to be healthy. There's no magic bullet for your health. You do have to actually take care of yourself.
I want to throw something in there. This study, according to the Oxford academic, but it specifically states that, and maybe it's because it's with they were only studying this group of people, but it talks about a decrease in testosterone in American men. So it doesn't seem to talk about women, and women do have testosterone. They release it in their adrenal glands and ovaries in small amounts. But I don't know if they didn't study women, or if it turned out that women's results didn't, you know, show any decrease that was significant. I would assume that if what you guys are saying is accurate, then it should affect women as well. If that's not the case, then there's different questions that we'd have to ask about why this could be happening. So it did only talk about men. Well, I can't really speak to whether or not women were tested.
Right. I think what Hannah said, though, I think we really do need to reevaluate the way we eat as a nation, as a world, because everything is injected with high fructose corn syrup. Like literally wheat thins. Wheat thins, I think the third ingredient on wheat thins is high fructose corn syrup. Like, what in the fuck is what? Like, seriously, and that shit is in everything. And you know, it's sad that we have become a nation that values convenience over, over health, over
everything.
Yeah, it's just it's insane. And I think this absolutely plays into what we're seeing. Like, you know, it seems too convenient that when you look at the way these things become prominent, like high fructose corn syrup replacing sugars and things like that, and then you see these other things becoming prominent along with them, it's like, well, maybe there's a correlation there. You know, maybe you know, this and this are equaling this thing. So I don't know. I think a lot of the problems with our society are dietary and convenience based. You know, we eat too much shitty fucking food. And,
and there's also
there's
also things like there are some potentially long-term effects to short-term solutions that we tend to put in place, such as birth control has some effects on women's mate selection as well as the products of those of the children they have. So, like when they get off birth control, it can actually affect the baby because they're selecting essentially the kind of partner that it seems like it's right for them at the time while they're on the pill, but when they get off the pill, they are not right, and that can happen.
Well, the pill could affect your personality overall. You know,
so there are
your
other
hormones
things.
have an effect on if you're not paying attention to your changes in your character, that the pill can affect a lot of things, and that's something that it's not really emphasized when you go in and talk to the doctor about birth control, that this can have, like, it gets brought up, but it doesn't really get emphasized much, that you need to watch for changes in mood and changes in the way, you know, sort of your personal outlook and everything. And I did use hormonal birth control for a number of years, and it did have an effect. And I could at the time I was aware to a degree, partly because people would tell me about it that knew me, you know, that were close to me, but also partly because I'd do things or feel a certain way about things, and I'd be like, why is this happening? And oh, well, you know, maybe it's the pills. A lot of people don't have that awareness of how their medication affects them and don't think about, you know, hey, maybe it's the pills. It's a drug. Just like if you use street drugs, they affect your brain. drugs that you get from the pharmacy can also affect your brain. Even the simplest stuff that you take, even
Sugar
stuff
can
that you're
affect your
taking.
brain.
Well, yeah, sugar has a massive effect on your
Yep.
brain. But we also don't necessarily know all the effects of artificial sweeteners. There's some indication, for instance, that drinking diet pop, there's significant indication that drinking diet pop contributes to obesity, not because the pop itself has calories that make you fat, but because the degree of satisfaction with it is different, and the signals that your brain gets from that degree of satisfaction are different, and you have a tendency to eat more when you drink diet pop. And there's some people that have done studies that have countered that, and there's studies that have confirmed that, and they've all the studies that have been done on it are associated with either the sugar industry or the artificial sweetener industry, and there's not really anything independent.
Imagine
so you
that.
kind of have to look closely at it.
Right.
But from what I've seen in the people around me, it really looks to me like there is some validity to the suspicion that artificial sweeteners contribute to obesity rather than preventing it. And it's better to just, like I said, there's no magic bullet. There's no substitute for moderation. Eat real sweeteners and don't overdo it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
not to mention the other horrible effects artificial sweeteners have on your liver and your kidneys and other things as well. So,
well, I'm allergic to them, so I don't, I don't have to deal with all that. But
they turn me up, so I can't go anywhere near that stuff. It's a bad day LA for me.
And you gotta love, like, right? You go to fast food restaurants and you get the supersized meal, and you have the bun that's the size of your face, and then you get Diet Coke to go with it, and that makes it all better. You have the meat patty that is actually that like 3 times the proper serving if you're a meat eater. And I'm a meat eater. I'm an omnivore, strict omnivore, aside from things I'm allergic to. And that meat patty and the supersized burger, that meat patty and the double quarter pounder, like your regular serving of meat is the size of a credit card. Approximately the size of a credit card for a lot of things. And if you're eating more meat than that in one setting, you're eating 2 meals.
Yeah. You know what's funny, just as a quick aside, is I was at the grocery store one time this past summer, and I looked over at this woman's cart, and she had a 6-pack of Diet Cokes hanging, like Diet Coke plastic bottles. It was hanging on the edge of her cart, and I was like, oh, that's clever. I was like, just instead of putting it in the cart and taking up room, she had it draped over the side, like half on one side, half on there. I was like, oh, that's a clever little trick there. And then I looked into her cart to see what she had in there, and it was just filled with fucking like snack cakes and a pie and an actual cake and all this crazy fucking junk food. And I'm like, really? You're gonna balance out all that garbage there with a 6-pack of Diet Coke?
Yeah,
that's
way to go, lady. All right.
And that's typical. We make these decisions and we don't even think about it,
Yeah.
Like, oh, the Diet Coke's gonna solve everything. No.
Oh, yeah, Diet Coke.
No, it's not. No, it's
go.
not. I watched members of my family back in the 80s and 90s. They were all told go from whole milk to skim milk, and they did, and they all gained weight. And they all, when they switched back to whole milk, they either leveled off or started to lose the weight. And it's, to me, I look at that, and I've personally figured out that you still have the same amount of lactose in the milk, you have the same amount of sugar, that's the same amount of everything else except for the fat. So you don't get the fat in your system, you don't get that sense of feeling full, and it doesn't bond with the other nutrients to go through your system. So your glycemic load that you're getting from it is higher, and your glycemic load from whatever you're eating with it is higher. And all of a sudden, you're flooding your system with stuff that it's not going to be able to handle, as opposed to having those lower servings because you're satisfying your appetite faster. And that's like when I talk about good fat versus bad fat, it's good to have a regular amount of whole milk. It's not good to have a shitload of skim milk.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like eating a good serving of lean meat, eating a good serving of fish, or eating a good serving of chicken, and not overdoing it necessarily, but getting that good fat, eating nuts, eating eggs and stuff. When you sit there and eat pasta and cookies and white bread, which is basically cardboard with nutrients pumped back into it, and stuff like that, you're not going to be satisfied. You're going to be hungry all the time, and of course, all of the problems that we've had this explosion of in the U.S. in the last couple of generations are going to happen. And yeah, the Theo Davis, I noticed that as well. Whole milk is harder to find. Now, locally here, there's like Walmart carries it, Meijer carries it. I had a fight with Kroger over it. They were labeling their vitamin D milk just vitamin D milk, and it wasn't whole milk. And then in small print, it said part skim. And I noticed recently in the last several months, they've changed that, and they now have whole milk. So it's starting to make a comeback.
All right. We got to move on to the final story.
Oh, boy.
But let's go ahead and go with that. Oh, by the way, as far as this study goes, they did only test men. So we'd have to look and see if there's a women's study to see if there is a correlation between the two.
Yeah.
Scott, tell us about the most oppressive law ever.
Most oppressive law ever, aside the one that let people buy other people into slavery. But no, this is it. This is the most oppressive law ever. Oklahoma has just passed what news outlets such as the Bipartisan Report are calling the most oppressive law against women in history. The bill, House Bill 1441, penned by Republican State Representative Justin Humphrey, would require that women considering abortion reveal the father's name and provide his written, informed consent before she could have the abortion. The bill makes several notable exceptions, such as in cases of rape, incest, the father no longer being alive, or in cases where carrying the pregnancy to term would endanger the life of the mother. State Attorney for Planned Parenthood, Tamia Cox, opposes the bill, stating, while it made exceptions for rape, incest, and death of the partner, it did not consider women in abusive relationships. One of the very numerous problems with this bill is that there are so many questions left unanswered that may never be answered. Author of the bill, Representative Humphrey, had previously said, "There's a lot of questions that need to be answered in this bill. I'm willing to work with any of y'all to change things, to work with either side to make a better bill." Currently, the bill has passed the committee in a 5-2 vote. It still needs to clear the House, Senate, and Governor to become law.
Yeah.
Shall I air my unpopular opinions first, or would you like to go, Hannah?
I predict failure. Isn't gonna pass, and if it does, it's not gonna pass the test in the courts.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, man. I don't know. Anything is possible at this point. I just, I've said this before on the show, and I'll reiterate. I find it somewhat absurd, the idea that a man has the right to tell a woman she can or cannot have an abortion, frankly. I understand the idea of, you want to have equal say in it, but when we're talking about a pregnancy, in my mind, it's not an equal proposition. Sure, it may be my sperm, but this is the woman has to deal with this ordeal for 9+ months. And for a man to have a say in it feels kind of fucking wrong to me, So I don't know, man. Who knows if this thing is going to pass or not, but I think the idea of it is just kind of silly to me, because I just don't think men should, and I don't think they should have a say in it. I think it should be up to the woman, plain and simple.
Well, I've been pregnant.
Yeah.
I've been pregnant, been through labor, been through all this stuff. I think, and I didn't have a typical pregnancy either. I had a slightly unusual pregnancy. Now I didn't have the worst, the toughest. I didn't go through gestational diabetes or any of the really serious issues that could go along with it. But I had health problems that complicated things, and I think none of that really supersedes the question of whether we are dealing with one body or two bodies. And it's a situation where, I've said this before, when you get into the abortion discussion, you have multiple sides in the discussion. There's not two sides to this discussion. There's like 50 on each, quote, side, end quote. But the pro-life side is generally based on the understanding that the fetus is a separate entity. It is a living human organism that is genetically different from the mother. And it's genetically different from the mother because it has the contribution of both the mother's and the father's DNA. So from the standpoint of it being a genetically unique living human organism, or a genetically unique set of living human organisms in the case of twins, that is genetically unique from the mother, that this law only makes sense in terms of an attempt at preventing birth control abortion. And I hate to use the term, but that's basically what they're targeting with this, is abortion done as a substitute for birth control.
Right.
And I don't like the way it's being targeted. I don't disagree with people who want to change the way that women approach this. I'm pro-life, and I would like to see women change their approach to this. I would like to see fewer women seeking abortion and more women making responsible decisions before they get pregnant. And then if they get pregnant, going through with the pregnancy and then making the decision of whether or not to retain custody in a responsible manner as well. But this idea of the way this law is being done is stupid. And I'm just going to flat out say it. As a pro-lifer, I cannot support this because it's stupid. It's got a stupid premise. And it's not that I don't support men's rights to custody of their children. It's not that I don't support men's rights to have a say in this decision. It's a matter of this isn't going to stand up in court if it gets through the House and the Senate. And the reason it's not going to is because the law is not based on recognizing the fetus as a living human organism. The law is based on treating it, even though it is genetically unique from the mother, even though it does grow into a fully formed adult human being after being born, as a part of her body. None of the other parts of a woman's body do this. If you cut off your hand, if your hand gets removed, it doesn't grow into a whole human being. It dies. And there is no point in your body's development at which your hand will detach itself and grow into a whole human being. The only thing that gets called a part of a woman's body that does that is a fetus. Even your ovum won't do that on their own. Just the fetus. And that's so I as far as disagreement is concerned, this is an issue that isn't gonna get discussed rationally because of that difference of opinion. But this law, from both sides, from all 50 sides on each side, this law is really not a productive approach.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. I would say that I don't think that this is a good way to go about doing this, because I do think that, like as Scott points out, women have to carry it. Ultimately, they'll probably be the one most impacted by whether or not they decide to take the baby to term. And I think that I like the idea that a man has some kind of input. That doesn't mean he has influence, but should have some input. I'm okay with that. But the fact is, that's not going to happen in terms of whether or not this will pass. What if the thing you want to do is essentially make it to where the man and the father and the mother in this case have some kind of semblance of control when these things happen, and usually when we're talking about abortions, we're talking about things that were unintended, then I think that what's probably best is to give men the option to financially abort, as opposed to giving men the option making it to where women have to get like a signed permission slip from the man, because what that's going to result is that women are just going to go and get abortions done in ways that are dangerous to them, as well as not that it makes a difference since you're trying to kill a fetus anyway, but it's actually going to be more dangerous for them and under sketchier circumstances if you take away abortion. You can't do that now, and of course,
and it does matter.
Yeah, or they're just going to go to another state.
It does matter, and this came out with the Dr. Gosnell case, which I really need to stop calling that man a doctor. But Kermit Gosnell had, as part of his case, there were botched abortions where the baby was born alive with a disability because of the damage done during the abortion attempt. So this is I consider all abortions botched because you killed a baby, but when the baby survives, there is a chance that you have now caused a person to live the rest of their life with a challenge they shouldn't have faced because you damaged them in utero. So there is that risk with illegal abortions, that a baby could be that would have been healthy could be born with pain and suffering that they're going to go through in their lives that they would not have gone through. Now, I'm not saying that it's better for the baby to be killed. This is actually, in my opinion, this is an indictment of women's morality, that you can tell a woman that this is an immoral thing, and rather than consider that and go on a journey of self-exploration there and say, hey, do I really want to do this? She'll seek out an illegal abortion instead. That's something that goes back to female accountability, and it's part of the reason why I don't advocate a legislative approach to stopping abortion at this point. Because first, we have to teach women and girls accountability the way we teach men and boys accountability, before we will ever get to a point where women take a responsible approach to reproductive rights.
Yeah. And I think that, like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm looking at it from a pragmatic point of view in terms of what could some of the beneficial side effects be from this law if it went through. And the only thing that comes to mind is women will be put in a position where they will be essentially forced to make very cognizant and careful decisions about who they choose to get pregnant with, and to use birth control and things like that. Now, I don't know what the laws currently are in Oklahoma. I should have looked at that. I do have the details of the bill right here, which is simply one paragraph that reads, "The introduced measure prohibits the performance of an abortion without the written informed consent of the father. The pregnant woman seeking an abortion will be required to provide writing of the identity of the father to her physician. A person who contests paternity may demand such a test be performed. The measure would not apply in cases of rape, incest, or if the woman's life is in danger." There is, like I said, the one of the beneficial side effects could be, and this is me not making a moral judgment on what the bill is. I already, said that I don't think this is the way to go. But one of the beneficial side effects could be that women will be in a position where they will either start learning how to use birth control very effectively or demand condoms, or they will end up in a position where they're not going to be able to they will not be able to get abortions otherwise. And that could actually have different kinds of consequences depending on what kind of welfare state they have in Oklahoma and stuff like that. But if you allowed men to simply financially abort from these things, then I think that will also affect women's behavior without taking away their ability to choose. But now you've just effectively told them, especially because there are things that this entrapment stuff happens a lot, and a lot of times, it's specifically to get financial benefits, or maybe it's just for revenge, or maybe it's because they really want a baby and they don't care who gives it to them or whatever. But if you give men the option to get out of there, and maybe women's behavior will change as a result. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think that, as Hannah said, education is the best way. But if you're gonna have to look at what the potential positive upside is of doing either this bill, or, as I was suggesting, financially aborting as a father, I would go with the latter, and it could also have an effect. I think it will, actually, but.
I want to point out one silver lining to this may be the fact that it will bring home how much control women have over reproduction. Because I still do. I predict failure. I don't think this is going to pass a House, a Senate, and then get signed into law and not get struck down the first time it gets tested in court.
Not if those guys want to get reelected.
Well, even if they don't care about getting reelected, I don't think it'll get through all those measures, simply because I don't think they're all going to agree that this is a good idea, that this is well thought out or anything. I think somebody's going to come along and say, no, this is bullshit, and it's going to it's not going to make it through one of the two houses, or it's going to get vetoed, or it's going to get to court and a judge is going to be like, nope, unconstitutional, you can't do that. It's Roe versus Wade is a precedent, and you can't do that. It'll be one of those things. And as soon as that happens, that's going to be the point where we can say, hey, you know what? Look at how much control women have over reproduction, which does legitimize further the point about, I hate the term financial abortion, because it's, when you say abortion, you think of the procedure abortion, after which baby is gone. And feminists have used that terminology as an argument against this concept, when financial abortion is a much, the equivalent to it is more like safe haven abandonment or adoption. And I think that it is a legitimizing factor. Every time we see something that demonstrates how much control women have over human reproduction, the more control that comes out, the more obvious it becomes, the more you realize when a woman makes this decision, she's making the decision for both parties. No woman has to become a single custodial mom. That is always a choice, because you have the ability to use birth control. If you don't use birth control, you have the ability to abort. If you don't abort, you have the ability to go with adoption or safe haven abandonment, or let the father have custody of the child. Any woman that is a single mother today in the United States with custody of her children has chosen to be in that position. Even if she thinks she hasn't chosen to be in that position, she has chosen to be in that position by choosing not to use proper birth control, or not to use that birth control properly, by choosing who she's going to partner with, by choosing how she partners with this person, by choosing life, which again is a choice I approve, and then by choosing to retain custody as opposed to choosing not to retain custody. The father, on the other hand, his choice ends at pregnancy. Once a woman is pregnant, the father has zero control from there on out. He doesn't even have as much of a chance at obtaining custody of the child as the mother does. If he goes to court, he doesn't just have to prove that he's a good parent, and he does have to go to court. Like the mother's default custody when she gives birth, she's already got the child in her possession. If the father doesn't go to court, he doesn't get custody. If he doesn't marry her, he doesn't even get to be considered the father in a lot of instances. If he doesn't sign a paper that says he's the father, he doesn't get to be considered the father. The law already acknowledges the mother because she gave birth. So from the very start, the father is at a disadvantage. And then if he goes to court, his chances are not as good as the chances of the mother. He not only has to prove that he's a great parent, he has to prove that she's a bad parent if he wants custody. So all of these arguments for paternal surrender are valid arguments. And then as soon as something like this comes along, women are outraged at the very idea that a father might be legislated into having some say over the woman's choices. That just brings home the fact he has no control once she gets pregnant. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is Wikipedia snippets asked, is that Wikipedia snippet with just a T at the end asked, so legislation should be pro-choice. My thinking is that current legislation on abortion should focus strictly on keeping the abortion industry in line with the medical industry. It is being touted as a medical procedure. It should have to be treated as a medical procedure. It should be held to the same standards as any equivalent medical procedure in terms of like equivalent complexity, equivalent risk, and so on. And that's pretty much, whatever ethical standards a doctor would have to keep up with when dealing with other human tissue should have to be met for the tissue from an abortion, and so on. Aside from that, I don't think it's an effective approach at all. I don't think it's strategic at all to limit abortion based on morality using the law. And it's a terrible indictment of women to say that, to admit that, but it's still true. And that's it. Whether it's moral or not, I think what we'd end up with is the same result we get from any other type of prohibition.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong at this point. It matters what we achieve by making those laws. And if all we achieve by making those laws is creating a black market, then what good did they do?
Yeah. Well, to me, it makes sense to kind of, I guess the way I look at it is in terms of, if we're looking at it politically, to me, this seems like a libertarian issue. Like, let the person decide. You can have your personal side or whatever. You can be pro-choice or pro-life, whatever it is, but let the person decide. This seems like to me, it seems like an almost like a common sense kind of thing. And when they start introducing stuff like this, it lacks common sense to me. There's some degree of common sense that is missing from these sorts of situations. So,
well, biology isn't something that you can decide. It's set. It is set. It is a thing. It is not a concept. So what first needs to happen in terms of law and in terms of public morality and the entire discussion, what first needs to happen is we need to get to a point where we can settle the question of whether biology makes this living human organism that is a separate entity, a separate thing from the mother, her property or not, and whether it's that dramatically different 5 minutes before birth from 5 minutes after birth, and as we go back 5 minutes at time, at what point that change does become dramatic. And there's a lot of people that would set it at one part of gestation or another, and the pro-life community basically sets it at conception or implantation. And there's some division on conception and implantation, but in the long run, the abortion discussion will never be settled until we settle on that question.
Yeah, one day we'll probably. It's going to be more of a scientific, technological thing where we're going to basically have the instruments at some point that will tell us, that'll more clearly sort of define that situation, I think. But we're not there yet. So
no.
Most of us are speculating, and it's kind of it is a tricky situation. It's not an easy question to answer. That's why I say I'm more of the, give men an out of some kind. I don't care what you call it, but give men some kind of an out if they want it, so that they don't get entrapped. This is just to protect the guys who don't want to be fathers, and the ones that were lied to about, her being on birth control, the ones that used a condom and then she went and got the condom and got herself pregnant by it, the ones that essentially get entrapped or wrongfully, made the father. I mean, there are some really messed up stories of women who just they had to write in somebody's name, so they write in some dude, and he's not the father, and he ends up raising these kids, So you gotta give men an option and watch women's behavior. Should be legal
protection for sure.
Yeah, they need protection, and watch women's behavior change. Right. I guarantee it'll affect it. So, but I agree with what, this will be the last thing, because we got to end the show, but I agree with when Hannah said this is actually going to get people talking about how much, how much we think about the fathers in the situation regarding abortion. I think that needs to be talked about. I'm all for women getting abortions and having control over whether they want their baby, but I think that men should have something. It doesn't have to be, influence over her decision, but he should have something. And at the very least, if he doesn't want a kid, he should be able to get out. Now, if he does want one and she doesn't, that's really, really tricky. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But again, we're not there yet. I think we're still
that's where paternal surrender needs to come in. Mm-hmm. If he wants an abortion and she doesn't, he should be able to walk away. And it's the fact that a woman can walk away 3 different ways is enough right there to just legitimize the point that a father should be able to do the same. Yeah. And it's not good for the kids to force a parent who does not want to be a parent into that position either, because then the kid gets jerked around for 20 years. And that's a whole other area of dysfunction that we could discuss for an entire show. The other thing, one last thing I want to point out on this, things like Vasogel, and there was a pill that was under discussion. There's a couple of things coming out. Those are going to change the discussion entirely. So what we're looking at today, this discussion that we're looking at today, may become a moot point in the next 10 years.
I just want to know where that male birth control is. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Once we have that.
Well, you know what? If I can just interject one thing really quickly before we wrap, is I think that the problem I think one of the problems is this isn't a 50-50 yes or no type discussion. This isn't a black and white situation. There's a lot of nuance here, and that's what makes it so difficult, because we're not just talking about, oh, should they, it's not like, oh, should I take this pill to get rid of my headache, or should I not take the pill to get rid of my headache? This is not a very simple discussion. We're talking, there's so much nuance here, like you were saying, Brian, where like a man could get roped into a situation he doesn't want to be into because of somebody acting disingenuously, and
they just be like, oh, I'm on the pill, it's fine, or even if he says, I'm wearing a condom anyway, and then she goes and gets it, and
right.
I mean, and this is like, I know it sounds like some weird shit, but it happens a lot.
Oh, for sure.
So
Kung Fu Joe brought up something in the chat about the state too, and this is something that needs to be addressed because it keeps getting used as an argument. And that's the claim that if men have the right to opt out, that the state's going to have to step in and take their place. The state does that now. Mm-hmm. The state breaks up families and steps in and takes men's place, and then charges them for it, and doesn't collect back as much as the state spends. And it's actually written into law. And this is one of the reasons why I say men's rights is not a left-right issue, and left-right issues will not solve men's rights. The Republicans did this. In the welfare reform bill, they created incentive for the states to collect child support from absent fathers. And any father that has been kicked out of his home by his wife and is being kept from seeing his kids by his wife is considered an absent father. It's not just deadbeat dads. There are very few men that actually fit the deadbeat dad profile. And nobody calls moms deadbeats when they do the same thing. So we have this situation where the state can collect money back from the federal government for the money that the state spends collecting child support from the fathers. You know what Ohio did when that passed? Ohio made it mandatory to pay child support through the state so that they could say they were collecting from all of these fathers that they were taking, money from, that were already paying their child support. So the federal government pays Ohio to do what Ohio doesn't need to do most of the time. And that's probably true of every single state. I'll bet most states have made it so that you have to pay through the state now. So what's gone on then is this system created a bunch of new unnecessary jobs for people to do paperwork around something that was already taken care of for the most part. And the welfare system didn't get cheaper because of it. The state didn't become smaller because of it. The money is still being collected. Men are being told that they now have to pay more than they're making in some situations. Men are being put in jail for not being able to pay more than they're making. And the state is still spending all of that money. And in the long run, what you end up with is between jailing indigent fathers and poor fathers who are told to pay more than they can make, and spending all of that money doing paperwork so that they can tell the federal government that they're doing work to collect what was already being paid, they're spending more money than they're making back. So no, I don't think that telling fathers that they could walk away would cost the state more. I think it would actually save the state money, because the only thing they would be doing, because they're paying welfare to these moms on top of all that, that would just limit it to the welfare that they're paying to the moms instead of all of this money that they're collecting for fake work.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we should wrap it up. It is now 7:02 my time, and that means we've gone for about 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and take us out. I want to thank Max and Scott and Hannah for joining me on the Polecat, and I want to thank the writing contributors, My Stapler, as well as Mike J. Thank you, and Max, who also contributed. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Thanks for joining us on the Polecat Cast. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday with the Honey Badger Classic. Have a good evening.